Hello Internet, and welcome to our first official video on the YouTube. And so, to sort of commemorate, or sort of introduce ourselves to YouTube, we thought we'd do something different from our Facebook videos. In that, we're not just going to simply review a movie that's just come out. We thought that we would do a response to another YouTube user by the name of Confused Matthew, who we've sort of started to watch his movies or videos, and we really like them.
We're going to respect him.
Yeah, we're going to respect him as a movie critic, because he doesn't like, not that he doesn't like, but he's not afraid to say, oh, I don't like this movie, despite the fact that it's,
everybody loves it.
Yeah. And
example,
so
Lion King.
We've grown to love his movies, or his videos, and we thought that we wanted to make a response to it, but really, we obviously can't come on and be like, oh yeah,
You're wrong. I hate you.
Yeah, you're wrong. Lion King was the greatest movie of all time. No, we're not going to do that. Instead, what we thought we'd do is we'd do something different, and that we're going to come on and see a movie that we thought was overrated or wasn't as good, and we're going to say why.
And try and get his opinion on it.
And that movie is Spider-Man 2. Now, I'm going to start off right now by saying I don't hate this movie. A lot of people who are sort of friends of mine or family, I've given the impression that I hate the movie, but upon watching it more recently, I don't hate it. But there's a number of things that, in my opinion, make it bad and prevent it from becoming the greatest superhero movie of all time, like a lot of people have stated.
It's not that good.
So I'm going to start off, and I'm going to throw in my opinions. I'm going to a couple main opinions, a couple main ideas, and then I'll let Jordan come in, and we'll go from there.
Bounce back and forth.
Yeah. Anyway, and so the first thing I have to say is that, okay, it's the main issue. My main issue with it is how they completely changed Doc Ock's character. Completely. In the comics, he's represented as a sort of sniveling character who has nothing going for him. No love, no family, nothing except for his science. And in the movie, they represent him as this cool, calm, collective guy who has everything to lose. He's got a beautiful wife. He's a nice guy who, in the end, redeems himself. Now, this is not acceptable. You can't completely change a character. There's a such thing. Now, it's a statement that I know a lot of people will make is, oh, they had to adapt him for the movie. Now, there's a such thing as adapting a character without completely changing him, and so a good example of a good adaptation is the Joker in The Dark Knight, or even the Green Goblin in the first Spider-Man movie. They may be different than other iterations, but at their base level, they're the same character as they were in the beginning, or as they were in the comics, or as they were in the original adaptation. Doc Ock is not, and that to me is just not acceptable. I read a lot of stuff where people are like, oh, they did a good job. We wish we could go back and change it, but that's irregardless. What they did was they changed a character which has been established. And to me, if you're going to adapt a comic book or an adaptation, then you can't do that. That's like taking Batman and making him lighthearted and joking and happy. That you're completely
making him like Spider-Man.
You're completely changing the character. The other thing was, and this is a base complaint overall in the series, is that there's too much of Peter Parker, too much of that human element. I understand that you gotta find that sort of balance, the tipping point, and unfortunately, this sort of balanced more towards the section of human side, not to the comic side. Like, obviously you can't have it all comic book, but you can't have it all human. It's gotta be balanced, right?
You gotta have a healthy balance.
You gotta have that healthy balance, and this just did not have that. I mean, really, the series as a whole didn't have that, but this was especially evident in this movie. When I personally watch a comic book movie, the thing about watching a comic book movie versus a regular movie is, a comic book movie or a regular movie, you gotta judge it on the back, character, color, direction, all that sort of stuff. Whereas a comic book movie, not only do I have to judge it on that. Obviously, if they're terrible actors, it's not going to be a good movie. I also got to judge it on the base that it's a comic book movie, that it's an adaptation of a comic book. And when I watch a comic book movie, my first base judgment is, if I take this and put it into the pages of a comic book movie, would it be interesting to read? And this one just would not be interesting to read. as little as it's uninteresting to watch for most of it. I find myself in this movie for most of it going, when am I going to get to see Spider-Man again? When am I going to get to see Spider-Man again? It's just not, I don't, the thing about the Peter Parker character, like, I think I said this earlier, is he's not interesting enough on his own. You got to have Spider-Man, and that's why you got to have as much Spider-Man as you do Peter Parker. At this point, I'm going to let Jordan jump in and say what he has to say.
I don't think that it has enough Spider-Man, considering, okay, in my opinion, it should not be called Spider-Man the movie, or Spider-Man 2, whatever. It should be called Peter Parker 2. Because it's like, it's more Peter Parker, you're more following his story. There isn't as much
And honestly,
Spider-Man.
even in the comic books, he's never been interesting enough of a character on his own.
Yeah.
He's just not.
It's like in the comic books, they have him there. Not very often, though. It's like, maybe, not like, it's not like half the book is Peter Parker and half the book, or comic book, is Spider-Man. It's more like, more than half is Spider-Man, and that little bit is Peter Parker.
The lead up to
making
him
human.
being, yeah.
Showing
the lead
that
up to him
human side to
becoming,
him.
the lead up to him becoming Spider-Man, going to fight the villains.
Yeah.
I think the thing about this one, compared to the first one, and even compared to the third one, is it was kind of like Peter Parker's leading his life, and then Doc Ock just sort of happens to get in the way, happens to be there. Whereas the first one was him fighting the villain, and his focus was on the villain. And to me, in a superhero movie,
That's how it should
That's how it should be, and this just did not have that.
Now, another thing that bothered me was the fact that, and even in the third one, this bothered me as well, but that they kill off, like, every villain, pretty much.
Yeah. Well,
The only villain that they should kill is Green Goblin. That's
Exactly.
the only one which is acceptable, because he dies in the comic.
exactly.
Another thing that bothered me, but this is the third one, so it doesn't really apply to this, but you can't have your villains be redeemed.
You can't. It's especially it's in this one too.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, at the end.
At the end, you can't redeem. It depends on the character, but in the case of Doc Ock, you can't redeem him. You can't have 40, 50 years of him being this unredeemable character just to change him to this redeemable character. That makes no sense.
He's not, in the comic. I don't think he was ever redeemed.
This falls back again on the changing of your character. Again, there's a such thing as adapting your character without changing him. I go back to the Green Goblin or to the Joker in The Dark Knight. But to completely change him is just unacceptable. It's just unacceptable.
Now, another thing which this is just kind of nitpicky at this point, was okay, we mentioned this when we watched it the other day. The claws on his back. Now, they're controlling his mind, and in the book, there's a book version of the movie. They actually have it so that the claws are talking to Doc Ock and convincing him to do all the things that he does. I feel they should have had that in the original movie. It gives more of a reason for why he's all of a sudden turned into this crazy psycho killer.
It's just kind of like, you get it, it makes sense, but it doesn't really
flow
well. Just all of a sudden, it looks like he's just a bad guy. There's no.
They've made him to be this lovable, nice guy.
Yeah, and it's just like a switch. It's just like all of a sudden he's a bad guy just because they needed him to be a bad guy, because they needed a bad guy. Because logically, if that was the type of person, it wouldn't have gone that way. But because they needed him to be a bad guy, he became a bad guy. That was just how it worked.
And so, if they wanted to facilitate that better, big word, they should have added in, like I said, the claws talking to him, convincing him.
The arms, you mean?
Yeah. Well, they're the claws.
Claws, yeah. But one of the main things is he doesn't, in my personal opinion, logically have any real reason. His evil plot doesn't make really any sense to me, other than
they needed him.
They needed him to have an evil plot.
They needed him to have a reason for why he would go along with the arms, not claws, the arms, convincing him to be bad.
Yeah.
Yeah, you gotta go and rebuild your machine. Spider-Man screwed it up. Go do it. It still works.
It's an evil plot. We need an evil plot.
It makes sense. You don't have to use your brain and think about it.
I think, other than that, we don't have a lot more to contribute.
Nothing that's not nitpicky.
Yeah.
We're gonna try and stay away from the nitpicky, because people will just say, "Oh, you're nitpicking."
Yeah, exactly. So honestly, that's basically all we have to say about it. That's the movie we felt. was
got more credit than it deserved.
more pretty. I mean, again,
it's not.
We liked the movie.
I like. Okay, now see, this is where it hurts. I like Spider-Man.
Yeah.
And they just could have done it so much better.
Yeah.
Same with the third one. Don't get me wrong. I'm not being like a hypocritical kind of guy where I say this one's bad. Oh, but the third one's amazing.
Oh,
no.
the third one was awful too.
That one was just as bad as this one.
I have hope for the reboot. And actually, we're going to discuss the reboot. Plus, we're also going to discuss Shattered Dimensions and what we think of that. And the second part of this video,
Okay.
part 2. If you're just watching this for the Spider-Man 2 review, you know, you can turn it off now. But stay tuned. We're going to be talking about Spider-Man Shattered Dimensions in just a moment. Stay tuned. Yeah.
Okay.